honest.
In order to get into college nowadays, students are almost required to take an exam such as the SAT or ACT. The score that one obtains on one of these tests is often the determinant of whether or not they will be accepted into the colleges of which they applied. But is it really a fair way to assess how ready a student is for university? We do not think so. Given that we are finishing our senior year, we have taken time to reflect on the efficiency in determining who is really truly prepared for college that has been ascribed to by these tests. They hardly seem to have been worth the effort, a point of agreement shared by our interviewees, and yet so much importance has been placed on them. The reason for this is neither elaborate nor respectable, as it is profit. Greed runs the world in many respects today, unfortunately, which really says something about what is currently valued in society. The Culture Industry, Enlightenment as Mass Deception by Theodore Adorno and Max Horkheimer says, the truth that they are just business is made into an ideology in order to justify the rubbish they deliberately produce. We have been made to believe that tests lasting between 4 and 6 hours on a Saturday morning can accurately measure if one is able to handle 4 years or more of post-secondary education. The SAT and ACT were merely the products of an industry, which is made very manifest by the numerous payments required in order to take one exam and send one's scores to colleges. They are an evil who are perpetrated by means of our financial contributions, and reciprocity of benefit is not always a guarantee. A student may go through all the trouble of paying for an exam, taking it, awaiting the score for several weeks, and then sending it to the school of his or her choice. The score that person received could very well be lower than what he or she has been hoping for, or even if he or she has obtained a desired score, it could still be too low for colleges to permit the admittance of that said student. This aspect of the process of being accepted into college is typically what keeps students out of the schools they want to attend. Although that was never the original purpose, which is so obviously to profit from an increasingly obligatory process, it cannot be ignored. The SAT and ACT are a cancerous element of one's journey to college, and the only real way to combat it is to coalesce into something of a culture. There is indeed power in numbers, as Karl Marx described in his Manifesto of the Communist Party. Now and then, the workers are victorious, but only for a time. The real fruit of their battles lies not in the immediate result, but in the ever-expanding union of the workers. The union is helped on by the improved means of communication that are created by the modern industry. It was just this contact that was needed to centralize the numerous local struggles, all of the same character, into one national struggle between classes. Although we are not trying to depose an oppressive bourgeoisie, that which we want to see is gone is by no means less demeaning. We will now hear from the people who were kind enough to give their opinions on this matter, and from their insight, we ultimately hope to be able to answer the question, should one test be one of the greatest determinants of whether or not a student is accepted into college or not? While we may have our own opinions on such matter, it is nonetheless important to try and establish a consensus. When multiple people share a viewpoint, said viewpoint becomes all the more defensible. How many times did you take the SAT?
I took the SAT one time.
I've taken the SAT twice.
I took the SAT twice and the ACT once.
I took the SAT twice and I thought the ACT was stupid.
I took the SAT twice and the ACT once.
They suck.
So what are your thoughts before and after taking the SAT or ACT?
Alright, so before I only took the SAT and I was like beyond nervous. I took it in the middle of summer and I didn't know what I was doing at all. So I felt like it was a lot of pressure. After I was relieved, I felt like it wasn't as bad as I expected. It was just lengthy and I was exhausted after.
From what I recall, at least, the entire process was stressful. I distinctly remember, like, prior to taking the SATs, like, my parents would always tell me, you must do good in this. This is a major aspect of the college process. And overall, yes, it was really stressful. I think the only time where I was actually delighted with the SAT was when I was actually done with it.
So I actually didn't really prepare all that that much. Like I didn't take any classes and I didn't have a tutor for either the SAT or the ACT, but I did kind of like my own thing. Like I looked up tips online and kind of studied my own material, my own vocabulary, my own math. Specifically for the SAT, my pre-cal class last year helped a lot. Like I think Miss Burns really went over a lot of the material that was on the test for both of them.
Mhm.
As far as the ACT, it was mostly reading based, which is why I actually like it more. So I thought that my skills that I already had through school helped enough, so that's why I didn't need a tutor.
I was highly critical of the SAT both times, but in taking the ACT, I was actually a lot more pleased with how it went.
Okay. So did you have a different mindset going into it, and did that change once you had taken it?
Well, I got a 1320 on my first SAT, and I knew that that was a pretty good score, but I figured I would at least try it one more time. So going into my second SAT, I was a little more relaxed. I ended up with a 1400, and that relaxed state gave me a much better score. And then going into the ACT, I hadn't studied, but I was even more relaxed knowing that I had the SAT to back me up. And then going into the ACT, I ended up with a 31. So, the more relaxed I got, the less I stressed, and the better I performed somehow.
Was any prior knowledge useful in completing the SAT? Not at all. Not even events.
I definitely say that my IB math studies class definitely helped, because I feel like, well, the math aspect of the SATs at least, that class definitely helped, because almost everything we went over was definitely on the SATs.
I guess prior knowledge being taking the classes that you can take for that, right? Is that what you guys mean? Or just
like
from classes.
From school in general, do you think there's any?
I would think that in my experience personally, I didn't take any other courses outside of my actual classwork. I never studied for it specifically, so it was entirely based on what I had learned in school all along. So, and I was able to do decently on them.
I had none, so.
Some things that I learned in school and some prior knowledge was helpful. Not all of it, of course. There are certain things that I learned in school that I question their usefulness. But certain things like some very basic mathematics skills were helpful. English class and the application of English literature techniques on the SAT and ACT were a little more relaxed. It's a little more interpretive in school, and then with the SAT and ACT, they're a little more hard-lined, being multiple choice questions, and I found that they were less indicative of someone's actual skill in English. Science was a lot of, facts and math, which was, generally what you learn in school. And then as far as prior knowledge, a lot of it is problem solving and learning to take the test. It's not a good indicator of intelligence. It's a good indicator of how well you prepare.
Do you think that it's fair that the tests try to trick students, and for you, was any section on either test specifically hard?
I took the test so long ago, so I hardly remember them. But I think, yeah, it's kind of unfair that they do trick, but they want to see which students can kind of think for themselves and not just, kind of textbook answer them.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it does gauge whether a student's actively thinking out of the box. However, I'm trying to think, which section was most difficult for me? I think in general, just grammar on both of them, and I feel like that's where the most tricks are too. Like the questions where which punctuation is here, and then they're all so close,
Yeah.
you don't really know which one it is. And maybe less of those would be pretty cool, but I'm still happy with my score.
The grammar. They would specifically use like semicolons, and I don't think I ever learned that in any of my English classes. But I feel like for them to try and trick you would be stupid, because that's not how much you know, that's how much you're paying attention. And I feel like that's not fair to the people who are actually taking it.
actually sounds fair to me that the SAT is trying to trick you, because if they are expecting you to be proficient in the content that they expect you to know, then yes, I find it fair that they're actually measuring how proficient you are by tricking and confusing you. Well, I did find the math section hard, but that's more of a personal thing.
Wow. Yeah, there's always been those questions, right, that they have every couple of years that they're like, oh, that's against lower income people. They don't know what that might be because they haven't had those life experiences and that kind of thing. And I heard those things exist. I personally, as a student at the time, did not really think about that aspect, and I don't think a lot of students do.
I do think that it's a little bit underhanded that the tests have methods to trick students, but on the other hand, it may be reasonable because it should be noted that students need to be observant and students need to be mindful of things. So these little tricks, in moderation at least, should be added to the tests and should be maintained in the tests, because a difficult test and a difficult learning experience may prove to be more indicative of a student's ability. However, the tests are not the most well-organized and well-prepared methods of learning about a student. Instead, to learn about a student, it could be shown to look at their achievements and look at their overall grades, look at their essays, look at, say, an interview that they have with the college. And the other question was how hard were the tests?
Was any specific section for you?
For a long time, I had a lot of trouble with the English section because the way I interpret readings is not the same way that the standardized test organizers interpret readings. So something that could be right to me and something that I could argue as being right may not be correct in the multiple choice format.
The last section, if you don't choose like the essay portion, they literally just give you a random section. And I got the math section, which obviously was a total train wreck for me. But the idea of like, oh, like here's like a gotcha question, it's completely unfair. Because it's like, well, it's not based on actual skill or education. It's based on like, were you able to like see the logic loop-de-loops that we did? Stupid. The whole test is stupid.
Do you believe that we should have to pay to take the test as well as to send the scores, and do you think that the process as a whole is just overly expensive?
I think the process is definitely expensive. Like, for instance, my mom's school actually pays for all the students to take the SAT once.
Okay.
So I think that's definitely a good option for schools, because
Yeah.
some students might not be able to afford even one test, get alone taking 3, 4, 5 if they need. And if they don't get a good score or a score that they're happy with, they're going to have to keep taking it, and that cost definitely accumulates, especially if they're also having tutors and books and classes. So I think that the cost should definitely go down, or schools should pay for it.
I feel like it is overly expensive because you're already paying thousands of dollars just to go to the school that you want to go to, and then you have to pay like another $100 for tests, and they all require it anyway. The only places that may not would be like a community college. So I feel like if you don't pay for it, I feel like better people would be better off as a whole.
I would absolutely agree that the process is overly expensive. For the average person, applying to college costs several hundreds of dollars, and that's in base fees just to apply to a college. The college charges you for the application. Then there's the price to send your ACT and SAT scores, which is another add-on to that, and then there's the price just to take the tests, which at the current state are mostly mandatory to get into college. Most colleges are not test optional, so most colleges require you to send a score. I would say that college is becoming more and more of a necessity than a luxury, so something needs to be done to reduce the cost and increase the availability. but also increase the difficulty to get into college in order to not flood the system.
Yeah, I think it's a business, just like a lot of things. So they're considering like the people that are grading them as well. And I know my brother is one of the people, along with his wife. They're college English professors, and they grade the English portion, and they're paid to do so. So I think some of that money that you're paying actually goes to pay people to grade them. So unfortunately, it's part of it. How much that's actually overcharged is another thing, I guess. But from what I understand, it's actually used for the grading process, primarily.
Yeah, it is. If you have to pay to take a test that you supposedly need for college, then that's just kind of creating like a class barrier. Some people can go, some people can't, depends how much money you need. Stupid.
Do you think we should even have to pay for it?
No.
I'd say it's a waste of time and money, in my opinion. To pay to take a test is pretty shitty, in my opinion, because you can just go to college and take the test regardless. And I don't want to hear all this crap, oh, it helps you, oh, it lets you advance, it gives you extra. No. They'll still pull crap on you. They'll still want to make money. This is just a scam to make money. Yes, I'm an idiot. I don't know that much, but I know when I'm being conned.
Does the SAT negatively affect how students view college? Why or why not?
I feel like it just kind of puts more pressure on them and they become more afraid of the idea of college. So I feel like it definitely makes it more negative as a whole and more like an irrational fear of college. And really it shouldn't be. It should be more welcoming as the next part of your life.
I think so, because it can create a cynical attitude in somebody if they take the SAT or the ACT or both and wind up with harsh scores and get denied by a lot of colleges or a college that they were looking for, and that can cause people to become jaded and annoyed and agitated, and even the intense workload of the SAT and ACT. You know, it's a several-hour test with tons of questions, and this can create this negative view of what college is if colleges require you to take this strenuous test.
I don't think it necessarily affects one's view on college, because the SAT is only a factor for the college process. It only helps you get into a college. I think that in college, it is most of the grades that the person acquires that is actually important.
Yes, because they're not going to view college as like an actual chance to higher their education. They're just going to view it as getting high numbers and getting a piece of paper.
Do you think that the SAT and ACT accurately measure one's readiness for college?
No, I don't think so. The reason why I say this is because when I was getting ready for the SATs, my mom sent me to a private tutor and for 3 months, and I distinctly remember specifically learning like the tips and tricks for the SATs. One thing I definitely noticed was that I wasn't necessarily learning anything for college, rather I was basically learning how to ace the test.
Not at all.
I do not, because the way that they go about it, it's all multiple choice for what I took. And I feel like with that, you don't really develop your own knowledge. It's kind of just, you're reading which one fits the best, and it's all in one day. You have a bad day, they're going to think you're stupid because you got a 400.
I wouldn't say so, because even though I have decently high scores on the SAT and ACT, I don't know if I'm ready for college, because I don't think I have certain, say, organizational skills or time management skills yet, and those are things that I'll develop in college.
Mm-hmm.
My aptitude for college shouldn't be, found with sort of meaningless tasks and tests.
I don't really think so, because, for instance, one of my friends, I won't name names, but she got the exact same score as me, and in my opinion, she's so much smarter than me.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that maybe your ability to test definitely affects the score you get, and I don't think that's really an accurate representation of how well you'll do at a school or in the workforce.
Do you believe the SAT holds great importance? How much time is put into preparation for this exam?
I put no preparation and I didn't take any classes. I didn't even read a book on it. I feel like people put a lot more into it and they just kind of stress a lot over it. Because a lot of schools, they require the good scores, but it doesn't really do anything for you.
They are.
I don't think the test should be as important as it is, and I think that a lot of colleges are going in that direction. There is a type of application to colleges now called test optional applications, in which you don't have to offer your scores, and they'll judge you solely based on your essay and personal things and achievements of yours, and I think that that's a much better way to find whether or not you are apt for college.
I took the PSAT last year. It's also costed money, but that was last year, so it didn't really have any bearing on anything. So I completely forgot about it. And also, they're two different tests, so it's not like it really reflects.
And do you think like the SAT is like really important?
No, not at all.
Facts.
I think as far as getting into a college program, it seems to be the standard of how you would get into a college of your choice. As far as the personal value that I think it holds, I probably think there's a lot of different tests you could do to check for readiness depending on majors of interest.
The technical contrast between the few production centers and the large number of widely dispersed consumption points, in this case, high schools and other institutions that monitor exams, is said to demand organization and planning by management. Furthermore, it is claimed that standards were based in the first place on consumers' needs, and for that reason, were accepted with so little resistance, as stated by Adorno. We have been fed the delusion that we need these exams and that taking them is the only beneficial to the student. They want for profit leads these companies to make weak claims, and if statistics are provided at all, they are often skewed in order to portray the perspective of the entity using those statistics in a good light. According to SAT, ACT, both bad, the problem with college readiness exams by Zara Cornfield. ACT Incorporated reports that ACT Inc. reports that over 60% of people who took the ACT in 2016 reached the college benchmark. So then why do 60% of those students, upon attending college, get placed in remedial classes despite how they place on their standardized tests? There is a clear discrepancy between these two statistics. It is quite plausible that the ACT lies about percentages of students who actually benefit from taking their test, just that they will appear more benign. Where they're so benign, students would not have to pay for such a test, or simply to send their scores to colleges to which they are applying. Some of the questions asked to our interviewees we feel are also important to address on our own accord, such as, does the SAT or ACT negatively affect how students view college? As stated by Adorno, realistic dissidence is the trademark of anyone who has a new idea in business. In the public voice of modern society, accusations are seldom audible. If they are, the perspective can already detect signs that the dissident will soon be reconciled. Although it is certainly not apparent that these corporations are trying to silence people for saying that their tests are ineffective, we have to make sure that this will not happen for people that have the right to express their beliefs on a matter, especially on something as decisive in the college process. Are people of a lower income put at a disadvantage when taking the SAT or ACT? As stated by Cornfield, a major issue with these tests is that more than measuring college readiness, they measure financial stability. While this may not be an intended result, students from households which earn less than $20,000 per year on average scored around 400 points lower on the 2014 SAT than students from households which made $200,000 per year. This further evidences the malevolence of these tests, and yet they will still insist that taking such an exam will only be doing the student a favor. We must recognize the delusion for what it is. Otherwise, we're only perpetuating an elongation of the chain of which these tests restrain on the students by taking them. Do you think it's fair that the SAT or ACT tries to trick students? Was any section on this test distinctively hard for you? As stated by Adorno, not only does it make him believe that the deception and practice is his satisfaction, but it goes further and implies that, whatever the state of affairs, he must put up with what is offered. Regardless of whether people are aware that they are being deceived or not, the fact remains that they are forced to deal with something unjust. The college process has been structured in such a way that students who are not necessarily excellent test takers are put at a disadvantage in the college process simply because of their inability to masterfully tackle one test that they have to take at an unreasonable hour on a Saturday. Marx states the lower middle class, the small manufacturer, the shoekeeper, the artisan, the peasant, all these fight against the bourgeoisie. They save from extinction from their existence as factions of the middle class. They are therefore not revolutionary, but conservative. Nay more, they are reactionary, for they try to roll back the wheel of history. This fragment of text is relevant because of the arguable dichotomy it presents. People may fight and resist a little, but at the same time, they will ultimately adhere to their own ways in order to survive, and deep down, they wish that they can go back to a period when they are not controlled by whatever regime is in power. Our interviewees reveal a certain degree of dissension from the system that stands. But for as loud as our voices may be, they are meaningless unless the powers that be decide to make change from within. Is the SAT or ACT of any true importance? Do you think that there's a better way in which students' readiness for college can be gauged? Now this is the true moment of truth. We should see by now that the system should be altered. The SAT or ACT, although they may evaluate the ability of students, such aspects of critical thinking and time management, do not accurately measure one's readiness for college and therefore should be eliminated as a frequent requirement in the college process. Cornfield says, Hampshire College believes high school GPA gives more of an accurate depiction for college readiness, as it shows that students work over their entire high school careers instead of being based on one day. They also have to put in place a system which recommendation letters and writing supplements are used in order to put admissions counselors, end quote, in a much better position to predict their likelihood of success. Certain institutions have indeed begun to understand that these tests perhaps are not the best determinative of one's aptitude for college. As Joe Guzmano noted, some colleges have become test optional, which can mean that they really care about the student's welfare in the educational setting. Another possibility is that they have realized that denying admission to certain students based on their test scores is rather counterintuitive because they want to receive tuition payments from as many people as possible. Greed is so pervasive, but let us give them the benefit of the doubt. Things seem to be changing for the better, and if they continue to change successfully, it is likely that students will eventually never have to go through the brawls with these standardized tests that students from previous generations almost always had to endure. Thank you for your viewership. We hope you've enjoyed all the memes and how we have taken this matter of how effective the SAT and ACT really are.